of my life. I say at the beginning of the audition that I'm going to perform a monologue from the play A Scar is Born, and then I start to tell a little bit about my life, how I was born in Marseille, in the south of France. Then I moved to Paris. Then I went to New York. So I tell my life in a way that it's like an audition. So there are songs, there are sketches. It's a short show, it's 40 minutes. And it's non-stop with songs and sketches, few voiceovers.
Awesome. Um, why A Scar is Born? Not asking you to give away the show, but what inspired the title?
Yeah, you know what? I still don't know because this title is very enigmatic, and it's after a year and a half. I have toured it, and I still wondering why Oscar is born. Actually, it's the question, yeah, but it's the question that I continue to ask myself while I perform the show. So the show is still a mystery, and I really like that because nothing is set, uh, you know. So it's still a real mystery that Scar is born. It can be many things, and it change over the month. You know, the more I perform it, the more meaning I find in Scar is Born. It's a bit scary at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, any telling of your own story can always be a bit scary. How much is your recollection of things affected by your own, perspective, etc. Um, yeah. So very exciting that you're going to be doing the Cannonball Festival. How has that been? A lot of people haven't heard of the Cannonball Festival, but it is a tradition in more than just Philadelphia. How has it been participating in the Philadelphia version of it?
Well, it looks really amazing. This so it's part of the Philadelphia Fringe. The Philadelphia Fringe looks very important, a very very good festival, and they have created the Cannonball, which is very oriented with circus, acrobats, mime. And what is very interesting is that the theater where I'm going to perform, the Fidget Space, is in a row, is located in a place where there are several theaters. And there is also the Pig Iron Company. The Pig Iron Company is based, so it's a circus company, and I think they have worked with Lecoq, the French school from Paris, Lecoq, that is specialized with mime and circus. So it's very interesting to participate to that festival. Yeah, I'm very happy to do that. It
Yeah.
looks very original. There are some wonderful shows that I have heard about with many students actually from the Pig Iron Company who are going to perform. So I look forward to performing, but also to seeing different shows during the 4 days that will be in Philadelphia.
Awesome. Um, where can people see? You just mentioned Fidget Space. When and where can people see the show?
So yes, the Fidget Space is in Masher Street.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give you the address. It's Fidget Space 1714 North Masher Street. And the show will be the 21st at 8 p.m., the 23rd at 2 p.m., and the 24th at 8 p.m. So I have 3 dates, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday night.
Awesome. I think we did. So, going back to your point about the kind of London culture of having a performance space in a pub where like people come to see stuff. I think we have an element of that here in Philadelphia, more than most cities, because we do have a couple of small performance spaces that are in pubs and nightclub kind of settings. I'm thinking specifically of a couple of places on Sansom Street, or in Center City, and yeah, it is interesting because like the space itself develops a reputation, and then people just come just regardless of who's on stage or what's on stage. Sorry, my cat is trying to eat a cord, which is very annoying for me. Um, yeah. But is that like is that your favorite way to see a show? Is that or would you what do like a lot of conversation in theater right now is about how difficult production is, especially with like changes in the cost of things, changes in the cost of labor, the cost of materials, etc. Um, what's your preferred way to see other theater, though? Is it a small, intimate space where there's not much production value? Is it, something grander? Um, one of the things that I always like to bring up when we start talking production cost in the U.S. is how, like, in Spain they have the Zarzuela that are fully
Yeah.
financed by the state, and you couldn't produce that here in the U.S. You wouldn't, but they have 3,000 4,000 seat houses that are full every night. Um, but you definitely couldn't produce that here in the U.S. So anyway, long story long, what is your favored way to see theater?
Oh, I love everything. I love very big production at the Met or the Opera in Paris, in Bastille, or a small little show in a Fringe festival can be as extraordinary as a big production. Yeah, it's I love everything. I went to Tucson. I was lucky this year because I traveled so much with my show. So I went to Tucson at the National Theater, and I saw this production of Tennessee William, the Glass Menagerie. That was really fantastic. So, and then I saw a little show in a cabaret at the Fringe Tucson. That was beautiful. So yeah, I like this contrast of things. A very big show with a lot of money, a huge budget, and then one artist alone. With a very very tiny budget, and the show can be as good. So yeah, everything is interesting. In London, I perform under a train station. So the Volt Festival is in a tunnel, and every 10-15 minutes there was a train coming, and I was lucky because there was a strike. So I the day I performed, there was no train. Otherwise, I can tell you the noise was terrible. So that's the Vault Festival. They perform under it's the Vault. The Vault is a huge tunnel. I think it was opened during the war. I don't know exactly what it is, but so you perform. There are plenty of theaters under a tunnel, in a tunnel, and when you perform, the train is above you. And I saw beautiful shows also there. Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to see great shows in Philadelphia. So
I mean, it's interesting from my perspective. I've been in production in Philadelphia, since like the 2010s. 2011, I think, was the first show I ever worked as a technician on. But I've seen recently a lot of the folks that I spend my time in production with, going to individual shows or smaller production budgets, and telling more intimate stories at the same time. So it is very interesting to see how the economics of production have been affecting everything. Um, yeah, while at the same time, it's also interesting to see like an entire cohort of people that I know approaching shows in this way, like you are, like as individual performers or small cast. One of the pieces that I did the tech for during recent that is up during Fringe is a three-person cast, and so but it's in a small space as well. So it's in an art gallery in in Chinatown. So yeah, it is interesting to see. um, Excuse me, and it ties into today's topics. So, just to, I usually say this before the show starts, but I'll explain it to you live here as we're talking. I like to, like have our guests participate in a conversation about the day's topics. So, whether you're familiar with them or have any special knowledge about them or whatever, you're an artist. You think about things all the time. And no, I mean, you do. Any living human being thinks about things all the time, but I always find artists' opinions to be somewhat more interesting, I guess. Um, um, so I think this ties in with the general overall topic of can you afford housing? Can anyone? Is the rent too damn high? So I don't know if you're familiar with the kind of what became a meme of the mayoral candidate for New York, who his whole platform was the rent is too damn high. Obviously, concerned with housing, but interestingly enough, I think he had a point. Rents are unaffordable. Housing in general seems to be unaffordable for most people. And I think that productions like moving to smaller venues, smaller casts, smaller production budgets, I think is tied into that. I don't know if that's a weird way. Obviously, all us artists have to live somewhere. Where do you where do you live? When the rent's too high. How not to get too intimate, but what is your living situation? Do you rent? Do you own a home?
So I have a funny anecdote is, I lived in Paris 17 years and I had a nice little apartment and my life was really great. I had a good job and everything. And I had a midlife crisis in 2009 and I decided to move to New York. So I packed two suitcases, no paperwork, nothing, just packed two suitcases and I landed in New York in January 2009, during the recession, during the worst time. I arrived with my two suitcases. It's winter. It's horrible, and I don't even know how much is the price of a rental, or I don't know anything. I don't have an apartment, nothing. And I discovered how much was the rental when I landed in New York. And as a result, I lived 3 years in a studio with three people. I was renting almost the ceiling. I was sleeping above a woman. So it was just the conditions were just awful. But the city is so great that I completely forgot about my rental situation. And I spent 3 years like that in a studio in Hell's Kitchen. So it was in Midtown. That was great. So it's good to know the rental before moving to a city. But I didn't bother about that. I just moved and then I say I will just think about it later. Sometimes it's better to do that because if you look at the price of the rental, you will never move anywhere. So just move and then you figure it out.
There is an element. Yeah, I would say some folks overplan. But that sounds pretty risky from my point of view. I'm a risk taker, but that sounds a little a little bit even outside of what I might do. Um,
My life is only I only live my life like that. I just I just do it and then I figure it out.
well,
That's why I am in trouble all the time. Voilà.
Well,
That's it.
I'm sure that makes for an interesting story for your show.
Yeah.
Yeah, and an element that people can probably identify with. Just do it and then figure it out. I mean, I often complain, not necessarily on this show, but in person about a lot of folks are afraid to make a choice, to just do something,
Yeah.
to take a risk on doing something, and that always bothers me. That always is frustrating to me. I always think, like, why not? Oftentimes the choice, even if it's wrong, is better than no choice at all. But yeah.
Yeah, I have nothing to lose. This is the idea, you know. I go to Philly tomorrow. I have barely somewhere to sleep. I don't know anything. I don't know who I'm going to meet. If I plan everything, I don't want, you know, I want just to go, and I like the surprise, you know. I never look at a GPS, you know. I walk and then I discover things.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, that's the way I travel. It's I get lost. This is the point. It's getting interesting when you get lost. So when I arrived in New York, because I didn't know anything, it was very hard. But also it opened paths that are not in the guide, the touristic guide. You know. So this is how I like to live. Getting lost, that's the basic element. First, you have to be lost. To be to have the discovery, you know, to be able to discover, you need to get lost.
Um,
Um,
it's interesting that that kind of ties into there's a saying in the tech industry: move fast and break things. And I think that's kind of where the tech industry got that idea is that sometimes you need to you need to start at square one in order to make progress. Oddly, sometimes you need to back up from where you've gotten all the way back into the beginning, and then re-examine every assumption that you made. And sometimes you find that the assumptions were correct, and some people are really good at going, okay, well, we made this set of the assumptions that we made were probably for a pretty good reason, so like. I don't know. For instance, you made an assumption about when you were going to travel. Some of the assumptions you made had to hold true. Like you knew you could get on a plane. You knew you could arrive in the U.S. You knew you made assumptions that you were going to be able to find something to eat and a place to stay. Um, Sometimes we find that our assumptions are bad. So in this particular case, I'm talking. I'm roughly transitioning into Elon Musk and his idea to charge for Twitter. He mentioned. And I want to know how somebody like Elon Musk gets an invite to talk to the UN General Assembly, but or at the G8 or anything like that. It doesn't seem like he has any like really good, interesting ideas for humanity that would lead to that. Like I'd rather have somebody like you talk to the G8 than Elon Musk, but. At any rate, he was speaking to the president of the UN General Assembly about the future of Twitter, and mentioned offhand in the interview that that he was moving to a model of charging a small fee to anyone who wanted to use Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Doesn't sound good at all.
no, I don't think
For
so
Twitter,
either.
yeah, nah.
Um, and also is it is the move fast break things, but it's the move fast break things part of the assumptions that we should probably go. Oh, that was an assumption that we made for a relatively good reason, and the reason being people don't want to pay to post things on the internet. Like you have to monetize in another way.
I
Um,
think it's a good thing that like that we spend less time on Twitter. We have to cut this social media. I mean, so it's a good thing if it makes people pay. We will spend less time on that on Twitter. It's already a good thing for us.
I mean, yes and no. I would argue that Twitter, social media, etc., has, for lack of a better term, revolutionized the way in which we approach social change. It's more democratized it globally rather than, like France and the United States went through social upheaval at very similar times, creating democracies. Well, in the United States, we created a representative sort of quasi democracy republic. And then in France, there was a brief democracy that was immediately overthrown and taken over by a dictator. But like these things are. There was a lot of trade and discussion between France and the U.S., and a lot of social interaction between leaders in both countries at the time, which is why the ideas kind of built on themselves. There, and I these like waves of social change used to take much longer to propagate through the entire known world. Now, you have uprising. You have like marches in the entire globe, literally, over the death of a black man in the United States. Calling for police reform globally, like on a global scale, calling for the end of kind of the fascism of police forces, and that's quite something. I think. I think.
Yes, powerful, yeah, of course, yes, yeah. But our use is not always interesting. I think we scroll stupidly and we forgot about the power. I think the power of the social media. Yeah, um, yeah. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I use it. I use it a lot. Because I'm a small production company. I'm one person who's doing a lot of the creative work, and then another person who's doing a lot of the scheduling work and housekeeping. And without the resources of like some of the best reporters in the world at my fingertips, literally just by turning on Twitter and scrolling through, I don't know that I'd be able to like have as varied a conversation as I have on either this show or just in life in general. Um, so yeah, it worries me. There's some good things. There's some bad things. I don't know how I would eventually come down on it, other than I'd probably stop using Twitter, probably move to like Blue Sky or something. Um, sorry, I lost my page here. The care crisis. This ties into the rent being so high. I don't know if you have any children or elderly relatives. I have both. My mother is not in care. She cares for herself. My daughter is too. But we're looking in the near future at uh, both. We need childcare for my daughter, and then what happens if my mother ages into a space where she can't take care of herself. um, my grandmother as well is still alive, and she's in her 90s. What happens when she can't take care of herself? And what happened when my grandfather couldn't take care of himself was that my aunt literally bought the house next door to her to have them live there and took care of them all day, in addition to doing her full time job and taking care of her family. So, how does this work? How do people make this work? So a lot of folks rely on nursing homes or in-home care, and there's a staffing problem in both. More than half of U.S. nursing homes are unprofitable, and this is according to a Quartz article published on February 8th. But pandemic emergency declarations ended on May 11th, and with the ending, saying that that COVID is over, that the pandemic is over, which it actually sort of isn't. We'll get into the politics of that later. So too did a lot of money that the federal government was aiding people with in healthcare, and especially in nursing homes and things like that. Along with the ending of that aid, nursing home positions remain unfilled. The number of nursing and residential care facility jobs dropped during the pandemic from about 3.5 million to less than 2 million. And they're starting to regain. They're back at about 3 million jobs. But 3 million, like 1.5 million people lost their jobs in the elder care industry, and a lot of them aren't coming back. This is happening across a lot of industries, of course, but the loss of people qualified to and experienced in doing jobs is being felt very highly in nursing care, and with the pandemic aid ending, the lack of talent, or not the talent as in number of people, as in actual resources available to work in that industry, and the overall increase in inflation and inflationary pressure on both people working and people seeking jobs. How are we going to get to a point where this is affordable for because essentially all the money for the care comes from the family that has their parent or loved one in the nursing care facility. So, you know, the rents are increasing on those facilities. The cost of doing business is increasing on those facilities, and then the cost, even the not. It's not just this problem of staffing and the cost of employees growing ever higher. It's a combination of a number of things. some of them are seeking private equity investment, but I don't know that that's a good idea. Private equity investors are looking to make a profit at some point. Um, do these become profitable at some point? I don't know if I want the facility that's responsible for caring for my elderly loved one to be a profit center for some VC somewhere. Um, you know, anyway. Uh, and the same can be said of the childcare industry. A lot of people lost their jobs in childcare when the pandemic hit, and now every place is struggling to keep full staffing. Every childcare facility across the country loses staff constantly, and if you were a parent, like you would notice, and I'm sure other parents that watch this show know, it's a struggle to find daycare, to find childcare of any type. Um, you oftentimes end up on a waiting list. The number of daycares that are um, properly licensed and registered with the state are growing lower because you can start a childcare facility and not register with the state. It's just you don't get the same funding that you do if you do register, etc. Um, and it's been difficult for us to get our daughter in daycare, and that daycare facility has suffered losses of personnel and etc. So how do we again, this is an industry that's entirely dependent on how much you pay for it. Um, how do we make it affordable while also making it so that it's profitable enough that it can be run instead of at a deficit. Um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe they can learn something from us artists. We do often make a lot out of shoestrings, but um,
Yeah, I don't have any children. I am amazed when I see that people still have children, because I just don't know how in this world, in this society, we can still take care of children. And for me, it's absolutely not possible to have the responsibility of another person with me. Um, it's too, yeah. I'm really impressed when I see that people have children, really, because I can barely take care of myself. So I just don't know.
I find it not dissimilar from taking care of myself. It's one of those things, like you have to how they say on the airplane, you have to put your mask on first before you help others. Um, it's actually driven me to take a little bit better care of myself, though it's also been exhausting. Yeah. Um, and I think that a lot of these issues tie back together too. The issues that were mentioned as most important to voters. Let me find that list. Hold on one second. Um, I actually know where I have it, and just gonna take a second. Crime, number one. Education, number two. Jobs, number three. And then homelessness, housing, opioids, and infrastructure. Infrastructure was the lowest, but it's still ranked on Philadelphians, things that were important to them as voters. But if you can't find childcare, education becomes important to you for multiple reasons, because you want your child to do better than you, and not I don't know, be a burden wouldn't be the right term, but there's some way of saying it. But be their own independent person when they grow up, be able to take care of themselves. Um, Jobs, again, if you can't if you can't find childcare, if you don't have a good education system, you can't work. Um, and all of this ties back to housing and homelessness. You can't solve homelessness without housing. You can't solve housing problems without housing. Crime increases when housing is more expensive. Education goes down when housing is insecure because those children that are suffering insecurity in their housing don't do as well in school, and that affects the entire class, not just that particular student. Um, Jobs get tougher to fill when housing is a problem in an area. All of these things are very interrelated, um, and in ways that I guess seem obvious to me. Do they seem obvious to you? I don't know. I often don't know whether I'm just like somebody who's terminally like looking at these things and therefore I see them as connected, or if it is obvious that they're connected.
Well, I've traveled a lot to California this year, and I couldn't believe how many people were in the street. I perform in a theater where literally in front of the theater there were so many tents that that we couldn't even get into the theater. I mean, it's just yeah, I saw things that I could not imagine, honestly. Yeah, I'm still shocked actually.
Do you feel like the issues are connected though? Do you feel like solving some of these problems is interconnected, or am I just like barking up the wrong tree here?
Well, before going to California, I never thought I could be a homeless, I never thought of that. But when I went to California several times, I said to myself, it can happen to anyone at this point. I realized that it was not only a drug and a problem of addiction. It's deeper than that. So since I went to California, since I have traveled so much to California, I have realized that it can happen to me tomorrow. It made me in a very disturbing position in the world where I said, oh, yeah, yeah, I see things differently now. Those people can be me. It's like a mirror, honestly. It's very shocking, but yeah, it's scary to see that it can happen to anyone. There was a woman who had a master degree. She was in a tent in Venice Beach. Yeah. So I have a master degree. I saw myself in that tent. Um, it has become it's very fragile. It's a big city, a big country here that looks very rich, but actually it's extremely fragile. France is very small, but I never thought I could be in the street in France, sleeping in the street. But here in America, it's wild. It's a wild country. Yeah.
No, I think that, like you mentioned, it's really big. It's easy to lose track of individuals, and you, almost by necessity, you have to treat problems on more massive scale than you would say in France. Like we have the independent state governments that try to help with problems, and we have independent city governments like Philadelphia that try to help with problems. But they're not as well funded as the federal government, and the federal government controls the money. So that's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of an obvious to me that like a lot of solutions are going to have to be on a massive scale. Um, but again, sometimes I feel like I might be a little bit off in my way of in my worldview. Like, I spend a lot of time thinking specifically about these things, and so I wonder if like for artists, sometimes we get lost in our conversations, even with ourselves, in that we use very specific terminology or shorthand to talk about things that we're doing. And so somebody looking from the outside might look in and just go, "Oh, that's just a bunch of crazy people talking about nothing." But go ahead.
No, in France, if you go to the hospital, you are not going to lose your home. Here, if you have a bill, you can lose your homes and you can become homeless.
Right.
So it's actually the healthcare system makes people completely sick, because if you start to think of what can happen to you, you have a cancer of stress. I mean, just calling 911 can be you can lose your home by calling 911 because you're going to go to the hospital. You don't know if you're going to have any coverage. That's something in France and Europe where you don't really have to worry about that. And it's terrible that people go through this kind of, I think Americans have a lot of dignity because they never show their concern, and they are very noble. They are not, they don't want to show their misery, but it's terrible when you hear that a cashier, for example, in a supermarket just had a heart attack, and now she received a bill of $100,000 and she cannot pay it, and she still smile, and still she's still very nice. But yeah, I think Americans are incredibly very impressed by the courage and the dignity of Americans, but at the same time they should fight more for their rights, because too much dignity maybe prevent to fight. It's not normal to go to the hospital and lose your home and become homeless. That's a real trouble here.
It is unfortunately normalized here. We talk about normalization a lot. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about dignity. I don't know that it's so much dignity as naivety. Um, I, again, maybe because I spend too much time thinking about these sort of things, I look at them. I look at folks like the lady that got the $100,000 bill for her heart attack, and my amazement is that this doesn't drive her and all the people around her to vote in their best interest, to like ask their government for the things that they need. We need universal health care. We need non-single payer. We need individually choosable insurance programs that aren't linked to our jobs. That everybody can pay into. Again, choose the best insurance system would be if everyone paid for insurance, and then got to choose the insurance that worked for them. But we don't have that system, and we also have an electorate, a group of people who are citizens who don't like to think about those sort of things. Where do we as artists, as publishers, as speakers, as thinkers, how do we get that message out? How do we get the message out that these things are actually quite important? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I sometimes sit in wonder at that, like, that person is probably going to vote in the next election the same as she did the last election. And she's probably not going to examine the position of the person she's voting for. She's just going to look at the letter behind their name, the R or the D. Um, and that's troubling, like why don't we examine our candidates more? Why do we just rely on the party that they're with to determine who we're voting for? And it's frustrating too to me, to people who like actually care about these things. Oh, what is the end of it all? Where do we how do we get people to care enough to really examine it? Um, this ties into the lawless lawmakers section. Ken Paxton, Attorney General of Texas, the state of Texas, um, relatively famous for bringing up lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit in federal court against the Biden administration following Trump's loss in the election between him and Joe Biden. Yes, Trump did lose the election. Joe Biden did win the election. There's no doubt about that, yet Ken Paxton has brought lawsuits saying that the election was rigged, or that the election was invalid, or that Trump should be the president still anyway. Not only has he brought these cases against the Biden administration, he's also supported a version of the justice system in Texas that goes after people seeking abortion or early child care, people seeking women's health care, people seeking trans health care, people who are gay or lesbian or queer or bi or transsexual. Just in general, driving a anti. I mean, like when we call people anti-choice, we're usually talking abortion, but anti-choice in general, like it goes from everything from abortion to the way you look, like what you wear. A recent Republican versus Democrat argument is the Senate recently suspended its rules on dress code because the state senator from Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, is a massive man at something like 6'8", and 300-ish pounds soaking wet. And he doesn't fit in suits. They don't fit his frame. He's a very large man. He's very large framed. And so he's always, in the entire time he's been in politics, worn hoodies, sweatpants, shorts, very famously wearing shorts all year round, which is a Central PA thing, which is where he's from. But so the Senate, being the majority being Democrats, suspended the dress code rules so that Senator Fetterman could enter the chamber more frequently without having to spend a lot of his personal budget on new clothes. I mean, France, Paris, well known for being sartorially dedicated. What do you think? What do you think that this should be an issue between Republicans and Democrats?
About the clothes?
Yeah.
Seriously, I don't know.
I mean, like seriously, like in France, would it be a problem if one of your politicians was poorly dressed?
In France, you have to be dressed. So I mean, yeah, we don't joke. There are several things we don't joke with: is love, wine, clothes. uh, yeah, no, they like to dress in France. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
funny. You know, when I travel to Europe,
yeah.
I I, I find them all the men very cute. Yeah, I don't know how to say. They are more into fashion and tight suit. You know, it's kind of funny. And then I come to America, and it's not the same way. You know,
No,
men
I
are
mean
kind of
I wear a t-shirt every day, so you know.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I love to go from America to Europe. You know, it's kind of funny to come back.
Yeah, it's definitely
Back and forth.
eye-opening
Eye-opening, yeah.
to travel. But anyway, the point here being, you know, like this became an issue that is along party lines because, you know, Democrats are like, you know, it's fine. He can wear whatever he wants on the Senate floor, and Republicans are suddenly like, oh no, everybody has to be dressed in three-piece suits to be in the Senate, you know. And I just you know I find all of this fascinating because it seems to be um, a desire by Republicans to follow a set of rules, you know, like be very regulated by rules, and yet the majority of them argue against rules constantly, saying that personal freedoms are more important. Um, and in the case of lawmakers like Ken Paxton was recently impeached by the Texas state legislature. He was found not guilty at his impeachment hearing, but he was impeached because he is relatively famously corrupt. He's received a lot of kickbacks for decisions that he's made. He's been responsible for insider trading schemes. He's definitely helped out friends and family members with you know, making purchases at an auspicious time or adjusting rules or enforcement of laws based on who he knows or who pays him money. Um, how can somebody that is corrupt like that, you know, and be so dedicated to enforcing the law?
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, so it's always the one who give the yeah give the law, like the priest. They always preach for God, and then you see what they do in the back of people. It's just incredible. Yeah, it's yeah. People who give lesson are always the the worst. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I'm going to wrap up today's show. It's 11:02. I want to thank you for joining me.
Uh,
And did you have any last thoughts? Anything you'd like the audience to know? Anything that you'd like folks to think about or talk about, or anything having to do with your show that you'd like them to know?
yeah. Well, I would love to have an audience tomorrow night. For the weekend, I'm not too afraid. Tomorrow night, I don't really know who is coming. So it's the Fidget Space, Masher, let me tell you, 1714 North Masher Street in Philadelphia at 8 p.m. I'd be happy to invite your auditors. You can offer invitation for my show tomorrow night. I have several invitations that I can give to your audience. And thank you so much for having me today. It was really nice to speak with you.
Thank you. It was really nice speaking with you as well. And yeah, if anybody would like to take advantage of that offer, just please get in touch with us via DM or comment on the video, and I'll put you in touch in order to get that ticket.
Yes,
Excuse me.
you can get free invitation for Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. I
Awesome.
would be very happy to have some audience. Thank you so much, James.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to go to a one-up of me, and I'm going to say goodbye to you for now. If you'd like to
Thank you.
stick around in the chat, you may, but I'm just going to outro the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And thank you guys as well. Thank you to my audience. I really appreciate you joining me every week. Special treat for you guys who didn't tune out yet. I hope you're still watching. If you are still watching, I saved this announcement for last because I thought it was really quite important. I'll be sending this out to friends and family as well. Next week, we're expecting David O, the Republican candidate for mayor of Philadelphia, to join us live on the show on the Coffee Break chat. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask him, either tune in live and submit them via any of our chat channels, or get in touch with us in advance by DMing or emailing your questions, and we'll hopefully get to ask all of them. We're really excited to have David on the show next week, and we hope that we'll be able to contribute to your decision making of who you'd like for the mayor of Philadelphia. I mean, we're still also trying to get Sherelle Parker to come on the show. And I am still trying to arrange a debate. For those that missed the news, one debate has been arranged between Sherelle Parker and David O so far. That debate will be held on KYW News Radio and KYW.com, I believe. And so is available to the public and should be a relatively interesting outing. They've also agreed that there will probably be more than one debate, and that those debates will be public. And hopefully we'll get to see a number of debates and questions asked, and get a better idea of who each of these candidates is. So with that, enjoy the rest of your week, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show, and see you back here next week for an interview with David O.